2026 will not change your life. Your decisions will. You have said one day too many times. One day you will focus. One day you will build discipline. One day you will become stronger. And yet, the years pass. Not because you lack potential, but because you wait for motivation instead of practicing consistency. Real change does not happen on perfect days. It happens on normal, tired, inconvenient days. The days when no one is watching. The days when your mind negotiates with comfort. The days when quitting would be easy. This is not about hype. It is about ownership. Your brain rewires through repetition. Your identity forms through action. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. And where your energy flows daily, your future takes shape. If you practice avoidance, you become skilled at delay. If you practice discipline, you become capable of progress. Small choices compound. Small promises build trust. Small acts of courage reshape identity. You do not need perfection. You need to choose yourself today. Because years do not become turning points by accident. They become turning points when you stop waiting and start leading yourself. If you're ready to rise above the noise, like the video, it tells YouTube you're choosing awareness over autopilot. Subscribe now and don't miss the next chapter in your evolution. And remember, the deepest transformation belongs to those who stay until the very end. Chapter 1. Choose yourself daily. People spend years waiting for permission. Permission from parents. Permission from a boss. Permission from a partner. Permission from circumstances. Permission from fear. Permission from the past. They wait for a sign that says, now you are allowed to live fully. Now you are allowed to take yourself seriously. Now you are allowed to stop shrinking. That sign never comes. No one is walking toward you with a certificate that says, you may finally prioritize your health, your focus, your growth, your peace. And the longer you wait, the more your life is shaped by people who do not live inside your mind and do not carry your worries to bed at night. The day you stop waiting is the day your life begins to shift. Choosing yourself daily is not selfish. It is responsible. If you do not choose yourself, someone else will choose for you. Their urgency will become your schedule. Their expectations will become your identity. Their comfort will become your limitation. Every morning you wake up with thoughts already running. Some hopeful, some heavy, some reminding you of bills, some reminding you of mistakes. And somewhere inside that noise, there is a quieter voice. It says you could do better. You could live better. You could become stronger. Most people ignore that voice because listening requires action, and action requires ownership. Ownership means you stop blaming timing, mood, childhood, circumstances, and other people for the direction of your life. Blame feels good in the short term because it removes pressure, but it also removes power. The moment you say, this is my responsibility, something returns to you. Control, clarity, direction. Choosing yourself daily means deciding that your life deserves attention today. Not next month, not next year, not when things calm down. Today, it means recognizing that no one else experiences the consequences of your choices the way you do. When you are exhausted, it is your body that carries it. When you feel regret, it sits in your chest, not in someone else's. When you feel pride, it warms your heart, not theirs. The emotional weight of your life is yours alone, so the decisions must be yours as well. Many people confuse choosing themselves with becoming cold or distant. That is not what this is. Choosing yourself means setting limits without anger, saying no without guilt, taking rest without apology, growing without explanation. You do not owe everyone access to your time, your energy, and your focus. Time is not just numbers on a clock. It is biological currency. Every hour you spend is an hour of nervous system activation, attention allocation, and physical energy expenditure. Once spent, it does not regenerate in the same form. When you give your time to things that drain you repeatedly, your future absorbs the cost. There is a reason people feel stuck year after year. They are waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect mood, the perfect plan, the perfect support system. But the perfect moment does not exist. There is only today, with all its pressure, imperfection, and noise. Progress is built in imperfect conditions. Confidence grows from doing things before you feel ready. Strength grows from standing up for your needs, even when your voice shakes. The nervous system recalibrates through exposure. When you act despite discomfort, your brain learns that discomfort is not danger. Over time, fear loses volume. Every day you teach people how to treat you. Not through speeches, but through patterns. If you cancel your own priorities for everyone else, you teach them your time is flexible. If you ignore your health, you teach yourself that convenience matters more than care. If you delay your goals repeatedly, you train your mind to believe that fear makes decisions. Choosing yourself daily rewrites those lessons. It tells your system, I matter. It tells your future, I am investing. It tells the world, my presence has boundaries. People often ask how to build confidence. Confidence does not come from reading about it. It comes from keeping promises to yourself. Wake up when you say you will. Move your body when you plan to. Learn something even when you are tired. Speak up when something feels wrong. Each follow-through strengthens internal trust, and internal trust changes posture, tone, and decision speed. Waiting for permission keeps people small. It keeps them quiet. It keeps them doubting instincts they were born with. Many adults still operate like children waiting to be chosen. Chosen for opportunity. Chosen for recognition. Chosen for success. But life responds to those who choose themselves first. This does not mean fear disappears. Fear appears whenever growth is near. Fear is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that you are stepping beyond familiarity. The difference between a shrinking life and an expanding one is not the absence of fear. It is who makes the decision. Fear or courage. Courage is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is daily. It sounds like, I will try again. I will speak honestly. I will stop postponing. I will not negotiate with my potential today. You cannot rewrite your beginning. You cannot change the environment you were raised in or the opportunities you missed. But the next step belongs to you. And that is enough. There will be people who misunderstand your growth. When you change patterns, it exposes those who benefited from your silence. When you set limits, it may create distance. That discomfort is not proof that you are wrong. It is evidence that something is shifting. Growth often creates distance before it creates respect. Think about how many times you delayed something important because you feared reaction, feared judgment, feared being alone. That fear has a cost. It costs years. It costs energy. It costs peace. Choosing yourself means deciding that your inner peace matters more than temporary approval. Daily choice is where change lives, not in dramatic declarations, in small repeated actions, in what you read, in what you eat, in how you speak to yourself, in what you tolerate, in who you allow close to your mind. You become what you practice. If you practice avoidance, you become skilled at delay. If you practice discipline, you become capable of progress. If you practice honesty, you become aligned. If you practice self-respect, you become grounded. Most people wait until pain forces change, until health collapses, until money pressure becomes suffocating, until relationships fall apart. Wisdom is choosing yourself before life demands it. Self-respect is built quietly. No applause, no attention. Just daily decisions that align with who you are becoming. When you respect yourself, you stop accepting less effort, less honesty, less growth. You stop negotiating with your own potential. Potential does not need permission. It needs action. And every morning you have one simple question available to you. What would choosing myself look like today? Sometimes it means working harder. Sometimes it means resting. Sometimes it means saying no. Sometimes it means speaking up. Sometimes it means walking away. Trust your judgment. Lives change quietly, consistently, daily, not through waiting, but through ownership. Stop waiting for permission. You already have it. Chapter 2. Face uncomfortable truths. Growth begins the moment you stop hiding from what you already know. Most people are not confused about their lives. They are avoiding honesty. They know where effort faded. They know which habits are draining them. They know which conversations they avoided. They know where they cut corners. The uncomfortable truth is rarely lack of knowledge. It is lack of action. Human nature looks for comfort before progress. Comfort feels safe in the short term. It allows repetition without resistance. But comfort has a hidden cost. It slowly weakens discipline. It lowers standards quietly. It trains the nervous system to believe that avoidance is normal. Facing uncomfortable truths interrupts that pattern. Truth creates clarity, and clarity demands response. Every person carries a private list of avoided realities. Health warnings ignored, skills left undeveloped, promises broken quietly, time wasted repeatedly, relationships neglected, goals postponed. These truths do not disappear when ignored. They wait, and over time, they become heavier. The weight you feel is often not failure. It is delayed honesty. There is a physical response to avoidance. When you ignore what needs attention, your nervous system remains subtly activated. Stress hormones rise in small amounts. Tension accumulates in the body. Mental noise increases. You may call it anxiety, confusion, or burnout, but often it is simply the pressure of truths left unaddressed. Facing truth does not require drama. It requires courage. Courage is the ability to remain present when discomfort appears, to sit with facts without building excuses around them, to look at results without blaming circumstances. Responsibility is not punishment. Responsibility is power, returning to your hands. The moment you say, "This is mine to fix," something stabilizes inside you. Confidence is not built by pretending everything is fine. It is built by acknowledging gaps and moving toward improvement. When you tell yourself the truth and then act, your mind begins to trust you again. Trust is fragile. Each broken promise weakens it. Each honest action strengthens it. Uncomfortable truths often show up as resistance. Resistance to starting. Resistance to finishing. Resistance to changing habits. That resistance is not random. It points directly to where growth is needed. Avoiding resistance keeps your life small. Moving through resistance expands capacity. Action is the bridge between awareness and transformation. Awareness without action creates frustration. Action without awareness creates chaos. Together, they create progress. People often wait to feel ready before acting. Readiness is a myth. Readiness follows action. Strength is built through repetition, not anticipation. Each time you act despite discomfort, your tolerance increases. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes routine. Truth is personal. It does not require public confession. It requires private integrity. Quiet, honest moments shape character more than public declarations. Growth happens when no one is watching, when you choose discipline over distraction, when you choose effort over excuse, when you choose clarity over comfort. Fear often disguises itself as logic. The mind produces sophisticated reasons to delay. The timing is not right. Conditions are not ideal. More information is needed. These thoughts sound responsible, but many times they are simply fear protecting comfort. Facing truth means questioning those thoughts. Ask yourself, is this delay serving growth or protecting comfort? Small, consistent actions reshape identity. Walking daily, reading 10 pages, practicing a skill for 30 minutes, speaking honestly once. These are not dramatic acts, but they are neurological signals. Repetition strengthens neural pathways. Your brain rewires based on behavior, not intention. Each time you act in alignment with truth, you are training your nervous system to tolerate growth. Avoidance creates anxiety because unfinished tasks linger in your cognitive field. They drain attention. Action reduces anxiety because movement replaces rumination. The body responds to movement with clarity. Energy becomes directed instead of scattered. Facing uncomfortable truths also means accepting limits. You cannot do everything at once. You cannot please everyone. You cannot avoid failure entirely. Acceptance reduces internal pressure. Growth is not about perfection. It is about direction. Many people carry shame about past decisions. Shame drains energy. Learning restores it. Growth requires separating behavior from identity. You are not your mistakes. You are your response to them. Facing truth without attacking yourself allows change without collapse. Consistency matters more than intensity. Intense effort without consistency leads to burnout. Small, consistent action builds endurance. Endurance supports long-term growth. Long-term growth creates stability. Stability produces confidence. There is strength in admitting gaps. Gaps in knowledge. Gaps in effort. Gaps in discipline. Admitting them opens space for improvement. Denial locks them in place. Truth opens the door. Action walks through it. The environment responds to action. Feedback appears. Results shift. Direction becomes clearer. When you face truth daily, your life stops drifting. Drift is subtle. It is not dramatic failure. It is small compromises repeated over time. Drift pulls you away from intention quietly. Truth realigns direction. Facing uncomfortable truths also improves relationships. Honesty reduces resentment. Clear communication reduces confusion. Boundaries prevent silent exhaustion. Avoidance poisons connection. Truth cleans it. Growth through action builds emotional resilience. Discomfort becomes familiar. Familiar discomfort loses power. Emotional regulation improves because you are no longer running from what you feel. Many people fear judgment, but most judgment comes from within. When you act on truth, internal criticism quiets. Progress speaks louder than doubt. Facing truth requires humility. Humility opens learning. Learning accelerates growth. Growth expands opportunity. Each day presents a choice. Avoid or act. Delay or move. Excuse or effort. Small choices compound. Compounding shapes destiny. Facing uncomfortable truths is not punishment. It is self-respect in practice. It is deciding to live intentionally instead of reactively. This path does not require perfection. It requires persistence. Persistence survives setbacks. Persistence adapts. Persistence wins quietly. Over time, difficulty becomes manageable. Manageable becomes normal. The person who faces truth daily becomes reliable. reliable to self, reliable to others. Reliability creates opportunity. Action clarifies purpose. Purpose sharpens focus. Focus improves execution. Execution delivers results. This is how real growth happens, not through words alone, through honest assessment, followed by consistent action. Face truth. Act daily. Grow stronger. Chapter 3. Build trust with yourself. By keeping small promises. Self-trust is not something you wake up with one morning, like a sudden burst of confidence. It is built quietly, invisibly, through the smallest actions repeated with care. Most people believe confidence comes from big achievements, dramatic discipline, or life-changing breakthroughs. In reality, it grows from something far simpler. Keeping the promises you make to yourself, especially the small ones no one else sees. Every time you follow through, you send a message inward. I am reliable. Every time you don't, you send another message. My words do not mean much. Over time, these messages become identity. Many people live with a quiet disappointment in themselves. It shows up as hesitation, procrastination, self-doubt. You plan things with excitement, but a part of you does not fully believe you will follow through. That disbelief was learned. It was built through repetition. Skipped workouts, mornings you promised to wake up early, boundaries you said you would enforce, but didn't, projects you started and quietly abandoned. None of these moments felt dramatic on their own, but together, they trained your nervous system not to fully trust your intentions. Trust erodes slowly, and it rebuilds the same way. One small, kept promise at a time. Your brain does not distinguish much between small and large when it comes to integrity. A promise is a promise. When you say you will do something and you do it, even something tiny, your system registers safety. It relaxes. It begins to believe you again. If you say you will drink a glass of water in the morning and you do it, that matters. If you say you will read 5 pages and you follow through, that matters. If you say you will go for a 10-minute walk and you show up, that matters. These small acts accumulate into something powerful. Quiet confidence. One of the biggest mistakes people make is overpromising. They aim for intensity instead of sustainability. They promise an hour when 10 minutes would be enough. They promise perfection when consistency would be better. When those large promises collapse, self-judgment steps in, and self-judgment damages trust further. A better approach is simple. Lower the size of the promise. Raise the consistency of the execution. This is not about shrinking your ambition. It is about rebuilding credibility with yourself. Imagine trust like a bank account. Every kept promise is a deposit. Every broken one is a withdrawal. If your account has been overdrawn for years, you cannot repair it through dramatic effort. You repair it through steady deposits. Choose promises that feel almost too easy. Let yourself succeed. Let your system relearn that your words carry weight. There is also a deeper emotional layer to this. Keeping promises to yourself is an act of self-respect. It tells your inner world that you matter enough to be followed through on. Many people show up reliably for work, family, and friends, while consistently abandoning themselves. Over time, this creates an internal split. Your needs begin to feel optional. When you start honoring even small commitments to yourself, you close that gap. You stop treating yourself as secondary. Small promises reduce fear of failure because the pressure is manageable. When commitments are realistic, resistance decreases. Momentum begins to build, and momentum is powerful. Momentum is not built through bursts of motivation. It is built through repeated follow-through. Each small win makes the next one easier. Your brain begins to expect completion instead of disappointment. That expectation alone changes how you approach goals. Honesty is essential in this process. Make promises based on who you are right now, not who you wish you were. If mornings are chaotic, do not promise elaborate routines. If evenings are draining, do not promise intense sessions of focus. Adjust the promise, not your worth. Self-trust grows when your commitments align with reality. And when you fall short, and you will, do not respond with punishment. Harshness damages trust further. The most constructive response is curiosity. Ask what got in the way. Was the promise too large? Was the timing wrong? Did you need rest? Treat setbacks as feedback, not as evidence of failure. Trust grows in environments of safety, not fear. Over time, something subtle shifts. You become more careful with your words. You stop making impulsive promises just to feel inspired in the moment. You become deliberate, intentional, grounded. This changes how you set goals, manage energy, and relate to yourself emotionally. You begin to trust your own yes. You begin to respect your own number. That clarity reduces anxiety. Internal conflict decreases. Decision-making becomes easier because you know you will follow through once you commit. Confidence stops being something you chase and becomes something you practice. This reshapes your relationship with discipline. Discipline no longer feels like force. It feels like alignment. You are not dragging yourself through tasks. You are honoring agreements you chose consciously. There will be disruptions. Life will interrupt routines. Hard days will come. Trust is not destroyed by a single broken promise. It is damaged when broken promises become patterns without accountability. When something slips, return quickly. Recommit at a smaller scale if necessary. Each return strengthens the relationship. It proves resilience. Eventually, these small acts influence how you see yourself. You stop identifying as someone who never finishes or always quits. Those stories lose power because your daily evidence contradicts them. Identity is shaped by proof. Self-trust also influences how others experience you. When you trust yourself, you communicate more clearly. You set boundaries more confidently. You follow through more consistently. External trust grows naturally. But the most important relationship being repaired is the one you have with yourself. There is something deeply stabilizing about knowing you have your own back. When motivation fades, trust remains. When doubt appears, consistency carries you forward. Small promises become anchors. They steady you when things feel uncertain. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. You only need to be honest with yourself and kind enough to start where you are. Self-trust is not built through pressure. It is built through presence. Show up in small ways. Let those moments accumulate. Let trust return gradually. Choose one small promise today. Keep it. Then repeat tomorrow. Chapter 4. Decide once, then act without overthinking. Every step. Most exhaustion in your life does not come from doing too much. It comes from deciding too often. The human mind was not designed to endlessly revisit the same choices, replay the same scenarios, and renegotiate the same commitments every day. Yet that is exactly how many people live. They decide to change, then question it. They choose a direction, then doubt it. They start, stop, restart, and mentally argue with themselves at every step. This constant reopening of decisions drains energy more than the action itself. Overthinking feels responsible. It feels intelligent. It feels cautious. But often, it is fear wearing the mask of logic. fear of making the wrong choice, fear of discomfort, fear of committing and losing the option to escape. When you overthink every step, you remain mentally busy, but physically stuck. Movement requires a different kind of courage. The courage to decide and then trust that decision long enough to see where it leads. Deciding once does not mean deciding perfectly. It means deciding intentionally, and then conserving your mental energy for execution instead of constant evaluation. Every decision carries uncertainty. Waiting for total clarity is another form of avoidance. Life rarely offers guarantees. What it offers instead is feedback, and feedback only appears after action. When you delay action by constantly reevaluating, you trap yourself in speculation. You live in imagination rather than experience. You decide to work out, then debate the timing. You decide to write, then question the topic. You decide to rest, then feel guilty and reconsider. Each time you reopen a closed decision, you fragment your focus. Internal friction builds. Simple actions feel heavy because they are preceded by negotiation. Deciding once simplifies your inner world. It creates a clear signal. This is what I am doing now. There is relief in commitment. When a decision is closed, the mind can relax. It no longer scans for alternatives. It no longer debates escape routes. Attention becomes available for action. Many people confuse flexibility with strength, but constant flexibility becomes instability. If you change direction every time discomfort appears, you never stay long enough to grow. True strength comes from choosing a path and walking it long enough to learn something real. Acting without overthinking does not mean acting recklessly. It means separating decision-making from execution. Decide during a calm moment. Think carefully. Evaluate clearly. Then close the loop. Once the decision is made, shift into action mode. In action mode, your job is not to question. It is to move. Adjustments can come later. Reflection belongs after execution, not before every step. Overthinking often appears as self-micromanagement. You analyze how motivated you feel, how prepared you are, whether conditions are ideal. This turns simple tasks into emotional debates. Deciding once replaces, "Do I feel like it?" with, "It is already decided." That shift removes resistance. Another hidden cause of overthinking is identity attachment. You want to see yourself as someone who chooses wisely, not someone who makes mistakes. But growth requires exposure to error. When you decide and act, you accept the possibility of learning through imperfection. That acceptance is maturity. There is also a time cost to indecision. Minutes spent hesitating, hours spent replaying, days spent waiting for certainty. These moments compound. Experience gained early is more valuable than hypothetical knowledge gained late. Deciding once also protects you from emotional fluctuation. Feelings shift constantly. Motivation rises and falls. Confidence changes. If your actions depend on mood, consistency becomes impossible. A single committed decision becomes an anchor. It keeps you steady when emotions try to redirect you. This builds self-respect. When you follow through without endless negotiation, you demonstrate leadership over your own life. You stop treating every task like a debate and start treating decisions like agreements. Carefulness belongs before the decision. Once chosen, carefulness becomes quality of execution, not reconsideration. Discomfort often triggers the urge to reopen decisions. The mind searches for alternatives to escape the unease. But discomfort is not a signal that you chose wrong. It is often a signal that you are stretching beyond familiarity. When you commit to acting despite discomfort, you train resilience. There will be times when new information genuinely requires adjustment. Deciding once does not mean ignoring reality. It means distinguishing between meaningful evidence and emotional noise. Fear is noise. Boredom is noise. Impatience is noise. Clear evidence is different. Learn to tell them apart. As you practice this, your mind becomes quieter. Not because life becomes easier, but because you stop arguing with yourself. Clarity increases when decisions are respected. You spend less time wondering what to do and more time doing it. Momentum builds, and momentum reduces resistance. You also become more decisive over time, not because you care less, but because you trust yourself more. Decisions become steps, not verdicts. This is especially powerful for habits. When routines are decided in advance, they no longer require daily negotiation. You wake up and act because the decision was already made. This reduces decision fatigue. Willpower is preserved for unexpected challenges. Decide once, act, reflect later. Life rewards movement. Clarity follows action more often than action follows clarity. You do not need everything figured out. You only need the next step decided and respected long enough to take it. Simplicity is discipline. When you stop reopening decisions, you stop leaking energy. When you stop overthinking every move, you start trusting momentum. And when momentum builds, progress stops feeling like struggle and starts feeling like consequence. Chapter 5. Protect your energy and stop pleasing everyone. Energy is one of the most underestimated resources in your life. It shapes your focus, your patience, your emotional stability, your ability to follow through. Unlike time, energy is not evenly distributed across the day. Unlike money, it cannot be stored for later. Once depleted, everything feels heavier. Decisions, conversations, even simple tasks. Yet many people give their energy away carelessly. They say yes when they mean no. They overextend to avoid disappointing someone. They absorb emotions that are not theirs to carry. They remain available long after they are exhausted. Protecting your energy is not selfish. It is necessary. People-pleasing often begins as a survival strategy. Early in life, you learn that being agreeable keeps the environment calm. Saying yes earns praise. Avoiding conflict prevents discomfort. Over time, this becomes automatic. You respond before checking in with yourself. Kindness slowly turns into self-neglect. The problem is not caring about others. The problem is caring about others at the expense of yourself. Every yes carries a hidden no. When you say yes to something that drains you, you are saying no to rest, to clarity, to your own priorities. When this happens occasionally, the cost is manageable. When it becomes a pattern, resentment begins to grow. Resentment is not cruelty. It is a signal. It signals that your boundaries have been crossed too often. Sometimes by others, often by yourself. Protecting your energy begins with awareness. You cannot protect what you do not notice. Pay attention to how interactions leave you feeling. Some conversations leave you grounded. Others leave you scattered or tense. This does not make anyone good or bad. It simply provides information. Energy awareness is data, not judgment. One myth about people-pleasing is that it preserves relationships. In reality, it often creates imbalance. When you consistently put yourself last, you train others to expect unlimited access to your time and emotional labor. Over time, respect erodes. Not because others intend harm, but because patterns teach them what is acceptable. Healthy relationships are built on honesty, not silent sacrifice. Stopping the urge to please everyone does not require confrontation or aggression. It requires clarity. Clarity about what you can offer without harming yourself. clarity about what you need to function well. When you operate from clarity, boundaries become calm instead of defensive. You stop over-explaining. You stop justifying. You simply respond in alignment with your capacity. The first few times you say no, guilt may appear. That guilt is not proof you are wrong. It is evidence you are doing something new. Your nervous system is adjusting to a different pattern. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may react with confusion. That reaction is not your responsibility to fix. Protecting your energy also means slowing down your responses. Not every request requires immediate agreement. A pause creates space to choose instead of react. In that pause, ask yourself, do I have the capacity for this? Does this align with my priorities? What will this cost me? This small interruption changes everything. Another important distinction is emotional responsibility. Listening is not the same as carrying. Supporting is not the same as rescuing. When you constantly absorb other people's stress, you crowd out your own emotional processing. This leads to numbness or burnout. Compassion does not require self-abandonment. Many fear that boundaries will make them unlikable. In reality, boundaries create clarity. People may not always like your limits, but they will understand where you stand, and clarity often builds deeper respect than constant accommodation. Energy protection also applies internally. Self-criticism drains energy as much as overcommitment. Rumination, replaying conversations, and rehearsing imagined scenarios consume attention. When you are constantly harsh with yourself, your nervous system remains under pressure. You do not need to motivate yourself through exhaustion. Another powerful shift is separating your worth from your usefulness. If your identity is tied to being needed, rest begins to feel undeserved. Productivity becomes proof of value. Availability becomes validation. But your worth is not measured by output. Protecting your energy means choosing quality over quantity. Fewer, more intentional commitments are sustainable. Overloading your schedule leaves no room for recovery. Recovery is not laziness, it is maintenance. There is also strength in allowing others to feel disappointment. Disappointment is a normal human emotion. You do not need to prevent it at all costs. Trying to manage everyone's feelings places you in an impossible role. Adults are capable of handling their own reactions. As you protect your energy, you may notice space in your day. That space can feel unfamiliar. You might feel the urge to fill it immediately. Resist that impulse. Space is where clarity returns. Space is where creativity emerges. Space is where you reconnect with yourself beyond obligation. When energy is limited, and it always is, priorities become sharper. You stop investing in what does not matter. You become selective with attention. This selectivity is alignment. Protecting your energy is not a one-time decision. Some days you will overextend. Some days you will catch it early. Progress is measured by awareness, not perfection. Each time you notice depletion and respond with care, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. Over time, the need to please everyone fades, not because you care less, but because you care more wisely. You understand that showing up fully for fewer things is better than showing up resentfully for many. When your energy is protected, everything improves. Focus deepens, patience increases, joy becomes accessible again. You are no longer constantly recovering from emotional debt. You are allowed to choose rest without earning it. You are allowed to say no without explanation. You are allowed to change your mind as your capacity changes. These permissions are not granted by others. They are claimed by you. Stopping people-pleasing is not about becoming distant. It is about becoming sustainable. Protect your energy. It is the fuel for everything you are building. Chapter 6. Train discipline when motivation disappears on hard days. Motivation is unreliable by nature. It rises when things feel exciting and disappears when they become heavy, repetitive, or uncomfortable. Many people build their goals around the hope that motivation will show up exactly when they need it most. That hope is what breaks them on hard days. Discipline is what carries you when motivation leaves. Not the harsh, rigid version people fear. Not punishment. Not self-attack. Real discipline is quieter. It is structure. It is follow-through. It is the decision to act even when your emotions resist. Hard days are not interruptions in the process. They are the process. Anyone can act when energy is high and conditions are easy. What shapes character is how you respond when everything feels slow, pointless, or heavy. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to feel inspired. It is about moving without waiting for inspiration. And something important happens when you move first. Feelings often follow action, not the other way around. On hard days, discipline does not ask for heroic effort. It asks for presence. Lower the standard of intensity. Keep the standard of consistency. Success on difficult days is not measured by how much you accomplish. It is measured by whether you show up at all. Motivation disappears for many reasons. Fatigue, stress, emotional weight, boredom, disappointment, uncertainty. None of these mean you are weak. They mean you are human. Discipline works with that reality instead of fighting it. When the mind says this is too much, discipline responds by shrinking the task. Instead of finishing everything, focus on starting something. Starting bypasses resistance. Once movement begins, inertia shifts. Your nervous system is wired to resist discomfort. It interprets effort as potential threat. But repetition rewires that response. Each time you act despite resistance, you teach your brain that discomfort is not danger. Over time, what once felt overwhelming becomes normal. Another key principle: separate identity from emotion. Feeling unmotivated does not mean you are an unmotivated person. Feeling tired does not mean you are incapable. Temporary states do not define permanent identity. Discipline is the practice of not letting moods dictate behavior. This is why routine matters so deeply. Routines reduce the need for decision-making when your mental energy is low. When actions are automatic, they require less emotional negotiation. Discipline thrives in predictability. When a behavior is chosen in advance, you do not wake up debating it every morning. You execute because the decision was already made. This reduces cognitive friction and preserves willpower. But discipline without compassion becomes burnout. On hard days, harshness drains what little energy remains. Compassion keeps you engaged. It allows you to acknowledge difficulty without using it as an excuse to quit. Discipline with compassion sounds like this. This is hard. I will still take one step. That balance prevents collapse. Training discipline is not about extreme challenges. It is about ordinary consistency. Doing what needs to be done, even when it feels inconvenient. Every time you act despite resistance, you strengthen the neural pathway of follow-through. Your brain learns that discomfort does not stop you. Hard days test your relationship with discomfort. Discomfort is not an emergency. It is a sensation. Discipline teaches you to stay present with that sensation without obeying it. Some days discipline will look like rest. Pushing through exhaustion blindly can be as undisciplined as avoidance. The difference lies in intention. Rest chosen consciously restores discipline. Avoidance chosen impulsively erodes it. This requires honesty Ask yourself, am I resting to recover, or am I avoiding to escape? Momentum does not require speed. It requires direction. Even a small action in the right direction preserves continuity. One powerful discipline practice is finishing something small. Completion restores agency. It reminds you that you can close loops even when energy is low. Completion builds confidence quietly. Confidence built through action lasts longer than confidence built through mood. Hard days often trigger comparison. You look at others and assume they are moving faster, handling things better, achieving more. Comparison drains motivation further. Discipline brings attention back to your lane. Progress is personal. Showing up for your own process matters more than matching someone else's pace. On difficult days, execution may not be clean. Focus may wander. Results may be average. Discipline does not require excellence. It requires continuation. There is quiet pride in disciplined action on hard days. It is not loud. It is not visible to the world, but it creates deep self-respect. You know you did not abandon yourself. Over time, discipline becomes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries when motivated. You begin seeing yourself as someone who shows up regardless of mood. That identity reduces internal debate. Hard days will never disappear. Life will continue presenting obstacles, emotional weight, uncertainty. Discipline does not remove these experiences. It carries you through them. It is the bridge between intention and outcome. When motivation fades, discipline remains. It does not promise excitement. It promises continuity. And continuity is what builds skill, progress, and stability. You do not need to conquer hard days. You only need to meet them with consistency. Train discipline, not as punishment, but as support. Let it be the structure that holds you when emotions fluctuate. That is how progress survives real life. Chapter 7. Create routines that reduce stress and save willpower. Stress often comes not from the work itself, but from the number of decisions required to begin it. Every choice, what to wear, what to eat, when to start, whether to continue, draws from the same limited pool of mental energy. By the time your day reaches its most important moments, that pool is often nearly empty. This is where routines change everything. Not rigid schedules that trap you, not perfectionistic systems that collapse under pressure. True routines are supportive structures. They remove friction. They reduce unnecessary choice. They conserve willpower for what truly matters. When something is already decided, your mind does not need to negotiate. There is no internal debate, no weighing of options, no emotional bargaining. You simply move. That movement creates calm. Calm is not the absence of responsibility. It is the absence of chaos around responsibility. Many people resist routines because they associate them with boredom or restriction. In reality, the opposite is true. Routines protect your freedom by conserving energy. When basic actions are automated, you gain more attention for creativity, problem-solving, and adaptation. Structure is not a cage. It is a container. Your nervous system thrives in rhythm. Predictability signals safety. When your days lack structure, your system remains subtly alert, scanning for what comes next. That constant alertness is exhausting. Routines tell your brain, this part is handled. And when certain parts are handled automatically, stress decreases at a biological level. Cortisol stabilizes, attention sharpens, emotional reactivity lowers. Willpower is not infinite. It fluctuates based on sleep, nutrition, emotional load, and previous decisions. Relying solely on willpower is like relying on adrenaline to fuel every day. It works temporarily, then collapses. Routines reduce the need for willpower by turning desired behaviors into defaults. The most effective routines are simple. Complex systems break under pressure. Overloaded routines collapse on busy days. Simple routines bend without snapping. They survive low energy. They survive unexpected stress. They demand little, but provide stability. Morning routines, for example, do not need to be elaborate. Their purpose is orientation, not performance. They guide the transition from rest to engagement without chaos. Even a short, consistent sequence, hydration, a few minutes of movement, a moment of quiet reflection, grounds your nervous system. What matters most is repetition, not complexity. Routines also reduce emotional decision-making. When actions are tied to feelings, stress increases because feelings fluctuate. When routines guide action, emotions lose control over your schedule. You act based on structure, not mood. This reduces inner conflict. Another overlooked benefit of routines is the removal of moral weight. When actions become habitual, you stop judging yourself for every choice. You are not asking, "Am I disciplined today?" You are following a pattern. Consistency replaces self-criticism. Transitions are one of the most draining parts of the day. Switching tasks, shifting focus, moving between roles, all require mental energy. Routines smooth these transitions. They act as bridges. For example, a short reset ritual between work and rest signals closure. An evening wind-down sequence signals safety and recovery. These small structures reduce background tension. Routines also create natural boundaries. When certain times are reserved for certain activities, overextension becomes less likely. Boundaries formed through routine are easier to maintain than boundaries formed through constant negotiation. However, routines are not meant to control every hour. Overstructuring creates rigidity. Understructuring creates chaos. The balance lies in identifying where stress repeatedly appears and placing structure there. Start where friction is highest. During uncertain seasons, routines become anchors. When life feels unstable, predictable actions create internal stability. Familiarity calms the nervous system. Saving willpower is strategic. You want your willpower available for meaningful decisions, creative work, difficult conversations, ethical choices, not for trivial daily debates. Personalization matters. Borrowed routines often fail because they ignore natural rhythms. Some people think clearly in the morning. Others find clarity at night. Effective routines align with your biological energy patterns rather than fighting them. Alignment reduces resistance. Routines also regulate expectations. When you know what a day typically contains, you plan realistically. Unrealistic planning is a major source of stress. Structure helps you see capacity clearly. There is comfort in repetition. In a world that constantly demands adaptation, repetition stabilizes identity. It reminds you that not everything shifts at once. Familiar actions ground you. Over time, routines shape identity without force. You do not need affirmations to believe you are consistent. Your behavior proves it quietly. That proof builds self-trust. But routines must evolve. Energy shifts. Life changes. What worked once may need adjustment. Updating routines is not failure. It is feedback. Flexibility within structure prevents rigidity. Missing one day does not break the system. Returning strengthens it. Routines also reduce mental clutter. When certain decisions are automated, fewer thoughts compete for attention. Focus improves. Emotional regulation strengthens. Another subtle benefit: Routines reduce impulsivity. When actions are planned, emotional spikes are less likely to dictate behavior. You respond instead of react. Evening routines are as important as morning ones. Without a transition into rest, stress carries into sleep. A consistent wind-down ritual signals your body to slow down. Recovery improves, and recovery strengthens discipline. Routines are not about doing more. They are about doing what matters with less strain. You do not need many routines to see change. A few well-placed anchors can transform how your days feel. Start small. Build where stress is highest. As routines settle, you will notice space. In that space, clarity grows. You move with intention rather than urgency. You act from structure instead of emotional chaos. Life will always require effort. Routines ensure that effort is spent wisely. Let routines carry the weight of the ordinary, so you can show up fully for what truly deserves your attention. Chapter 8. Speak honestly, even when silence feels safer. Silence often feels like protection. It promises safety. It promises smoothness. It promises the avoidance of conflict. In moments where honesty might disrupt harmony or invite misunderstanding, staying quiet can seem wise. But silence carries a hidden cost. What begins as caution slowly becomes self-erasure. Words unspoken do not disappear. They remain inside you. They shape tension. They build resentment. They create distance. Speaking honestly is not about creating conflict. It is about creating integrity. Integrity means your inner experience and your outward expression are aligned. When they are not aligned, pressure builds. You feel something but say nothing. You disagree but nod. You need rest, but agree to more. You feel hurt, but stay polite. Each time you silence yourself, you fragment your identity. The nervous system remembers these moments. It registers suppression as tension. Over time, that tension appears as anxiety, irritability, or exhaustion. Silence may preserve comfort in the short term, but in the long term, it drains energy. Many people learned early that honesty could be dangerous. Perhaps speaking up led to criticism. Perhaps expressing emotion led to dismissal. The body learned that truth carried risk, so silence became strategy. As an adult, the environment may be different, but the pattern remains. You stay quiet not because you lack clarity, but because your nervous system associates truth with threat. Speaking honestly does not mean speaking impulsively. It means choosing clarity over comfort. It means noticing what you feel, naming what matters, and expressing it with steadiness rather than aggression. Honesty can be calm. It can be measured. It does not require volume to be powerful. Avoiding honesty might keep interactions smooth on the surface, but underneath, disconnection grows. When you consistently withhold truth, others interact with a version of you that is incomplete. They respond to what you show, not who you are. Over time, this creates loneliness, even in close relationships. You may feel unseen, but the truth is, you have not allowed yourself to be seen. Honesty is not about unloading every thought. It is about alignment. When your inner world contradicts your outward behavior repeatedly, internal conflict increases. That conflict consumes energy. It weakens clarity. It erodes confidence. Speaking honestly releases that pressure. Fear often disguises itself as politeness. You tell yourself you are being kind by staying silent. You convince yourself that speaking up would be selfish or disruptive. But often, silence shifts the burden inward. You carry discomfort so others do not have to feel it. Over time, that imbalance becomes unsustainable. Honesty clarifies boundaries. If you never voice your limits, they will be crossed. Others cannot respect boundaries they do not know exist. Silence invites assumption. Honesty provides direction. It tells people where you stand, without hostility. There is vulnerability in truth. You risk being misunderstood. You risk disagreement. You risk altering how someone sees you. These risks are real. But silence has its own risk. The risk of shrinking, the risk of resentment, the risk of building relationships on incomplete truth. Honesty gives you agency. When you speak truthfully, you reinforce self-respect. You communicate to yourself that your perspective matters. Each honest expression strengthens internal confidence, not through bravado, but through consistency. Silence often grows from the desire to control outcomes. You stay quiet to prevent rejection or conflict, but you cannot control how others react. You can only control whether you show up truthfully. Honesty does not guarantee acceptance. It guarantees alignment, and alignment creates peace, even when relationships shift. Peace built on authenticity is stronger than peace built on avoidance. Speaking honestly also improves communication over time. The more you practice, the clearer your words become. You learn to express yourself without aggression, without apology. Honesty becomes grounded rather than explosive. There is relief in telling the truth, the relief of no longer rehearsing conversations in your head, the relief of no longer editing your personality to match expectations, the relief of letting things be as they are. Silence often creates imagined scenarios. You predict how others might respond. Those predictions feel heavier than reality. Speaking replaces imagination with information. Even if the response is uncomfortable, it is concrete. You can respond to it. You can move forward. Honesty also deepens trust. When people know you will speak truthfully, even when it is difficult, your words carry weight. Trust is built through reliability of expression, not constant agreement. And it is important to understand, honesty does not require endless explanation. You are not obligated to justify your feelings beyond clarity. Sometimes honesty is as simple as saying, "This does not work for me," or "I need something different," or "I cannot commit to that." You do not need to defend your boundaries aggressively. Calm truth is enough. Speaking honestly also means being honest with yourself first. If you avoid acknowledging your own feelings, you cannot communicate them clearly. Self-honesty is the foundation. Without it, external honesty becomes distorted. You do not need to be loud to be courageous. Courage can be steady, measured, quiet. Silence feels safer because it avoids immediate discomfort. But honesty creates long-term stability. Over time, choosing truth reduces internal conflict. You stop managing contradictions. You feel grounded in your interactions, and something shifts. You begin to trust your voice. Chapter 9. Choose progress today instead of perfect plans. Perfection is one of the most convincing forms of procrastination. It sounds responsible. It sounds ambitious. It sounds like high standards. But most of the time, perfection is delay disguised as preparation. You tell yourself you need a better plan, more clarity, more time, more confidence. You say you will begin when everything feels aligned, and so you wait. But clarity does not come from thinking alone. It comes from movement. Most people do not fail because they lack intelligence or potential. They stall because they are addicted to planning instead of progressing. Plans feel safe. They exist in imagination, where nothing can go wrong. Action is different. Action exposes you to imperfection, feedback, mistakes, and discomfort. So the mind chooses safety. but safety without movement becomes stagnation. Progress requires friction. It requires stepping forward before you feel fully prepared. It requires accepting that the first attempt will not be perfect. The brain learns through iteration, not theory. When you act, you generate data. You discover what works and what does not. You adjust, you refine, you grow. Waiting for perfect conditions keeps you stuck in speculation. The idea of a flawless start is comforting, but it is rarely real. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be gaps in knowledge. There will always be reasons to delay. The question is not whether conditions are ideal. The question is whether you are willing to move anyway. Small action builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence strengthens identity. If you wait to feel confident before acting, you may wait forever. Confidence is the result of proof, not imagination. When you take imperfect action, your nervous system recalibrates. It realizes that mistakes are survivable. That discomfort does not destroy you. That learning is possible. This rewiring only happens through movement. Progress is not dramatic. It is incremental. It is one page written, one conversation had, one workout completed, one boundary set, one step taken. Small actions compound. Compounding is one of the most powerful forces in growth. 1% improvement repeated daily creates exponential change over time. But that compounding cannot begin if you remain frozen in preparation. Perfect plans often become a substitute for identity. You feel productive because you are organizing, researching, strategizing. But if there is no execution, there is no transformation. Identity is built by evidence. Evidence comes from action. You do not become disciplined by planning discipline. You become disciplined by acting when you do not feel like it. You do not become courageous by imagining courage. You become courageous by speaking when your voice shakes. Perfection also creates unnecessary pressure. When you expect the first attempt to be flawless, the stakes feel high. High stakes increase anxiety. Anxiety increases avoidance. Lower the stakes. Raise the consistency. Give yourself permission to start badly. Start messy. Refine in motion. Progress is not linear. Some days will feel strong. Others will feel scattered. That variability is normal. What matters is continuation. The mind prefers certainty, but growth prefers engagement. Every time you choose progress over perfection, you strengthen your tolerance for uncertainty. You teach yourself that you can move without guarantees. This builds resilience. Resilience is not built in comfort. It is built in exposure to manageable challenge. Taking imperfect action creates those manageable challenges. Perfection also isolates you from feedback. When you wait until something feels complete before sharing it, you delay learning. When you act early, you receive correction sooner. Correction accelerates growth. Feedback is not failure. It is direction. Choosing progress means accepting that you will adjust as you go. It means understanding that refinement is part of the process, not proof of inadequacy. There is a difference between preparation and avoidance. Preparation moves you toward action. Avoidance keeps you circling the idea of action. Ask yourself honestly, is this planning bringing me closer to movement or keeping me comfortably distant from risk? Progress today is more valuable than a perfect plan tomorrow. A small action executed now carries more power than a flawless blueprint executed never. The brain rewards completion. Even small wins release signals of accomplishment. Those signals reinforce behavior. Reinforced behavior becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. Perfection rarely becomes identity. It remains aspiration. There is also humility in progress. It requires admitting that you do not know everything yet, that you will learn along the way. Humility opens growth. When you act imperfectly, you remove the illusion that everything must be controlled. You replace control with participation. Participation is what creates experience. Experience builds skill. Skill builds confidence. Confidence builds momentum. Momentum builds transformation. Waiting for perfect alignment keeps you outside your own life. Choosing progress pulls you into it. You do not need a flawless system. You need the next step. You do not need to master everything at once. You need to move forward once. Each day offers the same question. Will you plan your future, or will you practice it? Choose practice. Choose movement. Choose progress today. Chapter 10. Commit fully to growth and refuse to quit growth. Begins as an idea. It begins as a desire to become stronger, clearer, more disciplined, more honest. But desire alone does not transform you. What transforms you is commitment. Not the exciting kind, fueled by inspiration. Not the kind that feels powerful on the first day. Real commitment is quieter. It remains when progress slows. It remains when doubt grows louder. It remains when no one is watching. Committing fully to growth means deciding that development is not optional. It is not conditional. It is not dependent on mood, praise, or quick results. It is a standard. Quitting rarely arrives dramatically. It does not announce itself loudly. It comes disguised as logic. You tell yourself you need a break, a different approach, better timing. You convince yourself that stepping back is strategic. Sometimes rest is necessary. Sometimes change in method is wise. But often, the urge to quit appears right before meaningful growth. Growth is uncomfortable. It stretches identity. It challenges belief systems. It exposes limitations you would rather not see. When growth becomes repetitive or slow, your mind looks for relief. Quitting promises relief, but relief is temporary. Regret lasts longer. Commitment is not about forcing constant intensity. It is about refusing to abandon the process when it stops being gratifying. Growth is uneven. Some phases feel energizing. Others feel stagnant. In the stagnant phases, most people leave, not because they cannot continue, but because they expected growth to feel different. Commitment carries you through the uneventful middle. Refusing to quit is not stubbornness. It is clarity. Clarity that growth is not linear. Clarity that setbacks are not verdicts. Clarity that difficulty is terrain, not a stop sign. When quitting is no longer an option, something changes inside you. Energy that was previously spent searching for escape routes becomes available for problem solving. You stop asking, "Should I continue?" You start asking, "How do I adapt?" This shift is powerful. Commitment also reshapes how you experience time. When you expect rapid results, you become impatient. When you commit fully, you accept that meaningful change often unfolds slower than you want, but faster than you realize in hindsight. Looking back, consistency appears powerful. In the moment, it feels ordinary. Refusing to quit does not mean ignoring limits. It means distinguishing between rest and retreat. Rest restores capacity. Retreat abandons direction. Commitment allows you to rest without losing orientation. Growth challenges identity. As you evolve, parts of your former self resist. Familiar patterns feel safer, even if they are limiting. Quitting restores familiarity. Staying requires stepping into uncertainty. That uncertainty is not misalignment. It is transition. Many people flirt with growth. They engage, retreat, re-engage, retreat again. This cycle creates self-doubt. Full commitment simplifies the cycle. When growth is non-negotiable, distraction loses strength. You become selective with time, energy, and attention. Focus deepens. Shallow alternatives lose appeal. There will be moments when progress feels invisible. Effort may seem disconnected from outcome. Those moments test commitment more than failure does. Breakthroughs are often preceded by plateaus. Plateaus are consolidation. Skills are integrating. Identity is adjusting. Discipline is strengthening quietly. Boredom during growth is common. Many mistake boredom for stagnation. In reality, boredom often appears when repetition is building mastery. Commitment carries you through repetition. Mastery does not come from novelty. It comes from staying. There will also be regression. Old habits may resurface. Confidence may dip. Motivation may waver. Regression does not erase progress. It reveals deeper layers that still require integration. Quitting during regression prevents learning. Staying allows healing. Refusing to quit does not mean refusing to adjust. You can refine strategies. You can change timelines. You can evolve methods. But commitment remains anchored to growth itself, not to a specific image of how growth should look. There is power in staying. Staying when it feels inconvenient. Staying when it feels slow. Staying when no one applauds. Each time you remain engaged, you strengthen trust in yourself. You prove that you will not abandon yourself at the first sign of discomfort. That trust stabilizes you. It reduces fear because you know that no matter what happens, you will continue. Confidence grows from continuity, not from sudden breakthroughs. Staying also reshapes internal dialogue. Instead of harsh criticism, you develop steadiness. You stop dramatizing setbacks. You respond with curiosity. Curiosity keeps you engaged. Judgment shuts you down. Refusing to quit creates compounding momentum. Every day you continue, you reinforce the decision to stay. Over time, quitting becomes harder. Not because you are trapped, but because you are invested. Investment deepens meaning. Growth will test you. There will be days when you feel like quitting is justified. Doubt will whisper. Fatigue will argue. External validation may disappear. Commitment is what remains when everything else fluctuates. It is not the absence of doubt. It is action, despite doubt. Over time, commitment becomes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to grow. You become someone who grows. This identity reduces internal resistance. Growth becomes normal, not dramatic, not extreme, but steady. Life will continue presenting obstacles. Commitment does not eliminate challenge. It anchors you within it. Quitting promises comfort. Staying promises transformation. Transformation is not loud. It is cumulative. Refuse to quit, not out of pressure, but out of respect for who you are becoming. Stay long enough to see what unfolds. Growth rewards those who remain when leaving feels justified. Chapter 11. Understand the science of change. Rewire your brain through repetition. Change is not a personality trait. It is a neurological process. You do not transform because you suddenly become more motivated. You transform because your brain physically rewires itself in response to repeated behavior. Every habit you have today, productive or destructive, exists because it has been practiced enough times to become efficient. Your brain is designed for efficiency. It builds pathways around repeated actions. The more you repeat a behavior, the stronger the neural circuit becomes. What feels difficult at first becomes automatic later, not because you are different, but because your wiring is different. This is why small, consistent actions matter more than dramatic bursts of effort. When you repeat a behavior, three things happen. A cue triggers an action, the action produces a reward, and the brain links them together. Over time, that loop becomes automatic. Cue, behavior, reward. If the reward is comfort, distraction, or avoidance, your brain will favor it. If the reward is growth, clarity, or self-respect, your brain can learn to favor that too. But it requires repetition. Your nervous system does not respond to your intentions. It responds to your patterns. If you say you value discipline but repeatedly choose comfort, your brain learns comfort. If you say you want confidence but repeatedly avoid risk, your brain learns avoidance. The brain believes what you do, not what you declare. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire, remains active throughout your life. This means you are never fixed, but plasticity requires stimulus. It requires action. Each time you act in alignment with growth, you are laying down new neural pathways. At first, they are weak. They feel unnatural. They require effort. But repetition strengthens them. Think of it like carving a path through grass. The first time is difficult. The 10th time is easier. The 100th time creates a visible trail. Discipline is not personality. It is a practiced neural route. Fear works the same way. If you repeatedly avoid discomfort, your brain strengthens the avoidance pathway. The next time discomfort appears, avoidance feels automatic. But if you move toward discomfort in small, manageable doses, the brain recalibrates. It learns that discomfort does not equal danger. This is exposure in its simplest form. You teach your nervous system safety through repetition. Consistency creates safety. Chaos creates stress. When your actions are predictable, your brain relaxes. When you keep small promises, your system trusts you. When you follow routines, stress decreases because fewer decisions are required. Even identity is neurological. Your brain constructs identity from repeated evidence. If you consistently act with discipline, honesty, and follow-through, your brain updates your self-concept. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and begin seeing yourself as someone who does. Identity follows behavior, and behavior follows environment. Environment matters because cues trigger habits. If distractions are constantly available, distraction becomes default. If growth-oriented cues are visible, action becomes easier. You are not weak for struggling with temptation. You are responding to cues. Change the cues. You change the behavior. This is why routines, boundaries, and energy protection matter biologically, not just philosophically. Your nervous system also responds to perceived safety. When you feel overwhelmed, the brain shifts into survival mode. In survival mode, growth is not prioritized. Comfort is. This is why discipline must be paired with compassion. If you constantly attack yourself for imperfection, you activate stress. Chronic stress weakens focus and reduces executive function. You cannot build sustainable change from constant self-criticism. Calm repetition builds stronger wiring than intense self-punishment. The brain also responds to reward. Reward does not need to be external. A simple internal acknowledgement, "I kept my promise," creates reinforcement. Pride strengthens pathways. Completion signals success. Over time, your system begins to crave the feeling of integrity. Attention is another biological force. Where attention goes, neural activity increases. What you repeatedly think about strengthens neural circuits, even without physical action. This is why rumination deepens anxiety. This is why visualization can support performance. Your brain does not fully distinguish between vividly imagined rehearsal and physical practice. Attention is creative. If you focus daily on growth, on solutions, on effort, you strengthen those circuits. If you focus daily on limitation, comparison, and fear, you strengthen those circuits instead. The brain does not judge. It adapts. This means change is neutral. It is not moral. It is mechanical. Repeat a behavior long enough, and it becomes easier. The challenge is the beginning. In the beginning, old pathways are stronger than new ones. Resistance feels intense because you are asking the brain to abandon efficiency and build something unfamiliar. This is why the early stage of change feels hardest. But each repetition shifts the balance. Eventually, the new pathway requires less energy than the old one. That is when discipline feels natural. That is when honesty feels automatic. That is when choosing yourself no longer feels like effort. Your brain becomes what you practice. This is both responsibility and opportunity. You are not at the mercy of personality. You are shaping circuitry daily. Each kept promise strengthens trust circuits. Each honest conversation strengthens courage circuits. Each protected boundary strengthens self-respect circuits. This is not mystical. It is measurable. But there is something powerful about understanding that your daily actions are literally restructuring you. You are not stuck. You are wired by repetition, and repetition is under your control. Choose the repetition that builds the person you want to become. Chapter 12. Master the moment. Regulate your emotions before they regulate you. Emotion is energy in motion. It rises quickly. It shifts rapidly. It can narrow your perception or sharpen it. It can move you forward or pull you backward. But emotion itself is not the problem. The problem begins when emotion becomes the decision maker. Most people live reactively. They feel something, and they act from it immediately. Anger triggers words. Fear triggers retreat. Boredom triggers distraction. Sadness triggers withdrawal. There is no space between stimulus and response. That space is power. The ability to pause, even briefly, separates reaction from response. And that pause changes everything. Your nervous system is designed for survival. When it perceives threat, real or imagined, it activates protective mechanisms. Heart rate rises, muscles tense, focus narrows. In this state, long-term thinking decreases. Immediate relief becomes priority. This is why emotional regulation matters. If you do not regulate your internal state will regulate your behavior. Mastery begins with awareness. Notice what you feel without judging it. Name it clearly. Anger, anxiety, disappointment, frustration, fatigue. Labeling emotion activates higher-order brain regions. It shifts you from automatic reaction into conscious awareness. Awareness slows momentum. Once you notice the emotion, breathe. Breathing is not symbolic. It is biological. Slow, controlled breathing signals safety to the nervous system. It lowers physiological arousal. It stabilizes focus. Even a few steady breaths create separation between impulse and action. In that separation, you regain choice. Emotional regulation does not mean suppressing feeling. Suppression stores tension. Regulation means allowing emotion to exist without letting it control behavior. You can feel anger and still speak calmly. You can feel fear and still move forward. You can feel doubt and still act. This is strength. Emotions are temporary states. Identity is built through repeated decisions. When you act based solely on temporary states, your identity becomes unstable. Regulation protects consistency. Another powerful practice is reframing. The brain constantly interprets events. Interpretation shapes emotion. If you interpret challenge as threat, fear increases. If you interpret challenge as growth, courage rises. The event may remain the same. The meaning changes. Meaning influences behavior. Reframing is not denial. It is perspective adjustment. Ask yourself, what else could this mean? What can I learn here? What part of this is within my control? Control reduces stress. Helplessness increases it. You cannot control outcomes fully, but you can control response. Emotional resilience is built through repeated exposure to manageable discomfort. Each time you stay present with a difficult feeling without escaping it, your tolerance increases. Discomfort loses intensity through familiarity. This is why discipline and emotional regulation are connected. Acting despite mood strengthens both. Emotional regulation also improves communication. When you pause before speaking, you reduce impulsive harm. You choose clarity over reaction. You protect relationships. You protect integrity. There will be moments when emotion feels overwhelming. In those moments, shrink the horizon. Focus on the next breath, the next sentence, the next small step. Do not try to solve everything at once. Regulation is incremental. Another aspect of mastery is detachment from immediate narrative. The mind often exaggerates events. It predicts catastrophic outcomes. It replays imagined scenarios. Notice the narrative. Is this thought accurate, or is it fear speaking loudly? Questioning narrative reduces emotional intensity. Your brain seeks coherence. If you repeatedly respond calmly under stress, it learns that stress does not equal chaos. This builds internal stability. Over time, emotional neutrality becomes accessible. Neutrality is not numbness. It is steadiness. You do not swing wildly between extremes. You remain centered. Centering requires practice. Daily micro moments of regulation. Pausing before responding. Breathing before deciding. Observing before reacting. Strengthen this skill. You do not need to eliminate emotion. You need to lead it. Emotion is powerful energy. When directed intentionally, it fuels effort. It deepens focus. It sharpens clarity. When unmanaged, it fragments attention. Mastery is not emotional silence. It is emotional alignment. You will still feel frustration. You will still feel fear. But those feelings will no longer dictate identity. You will respond instead of react. That shift creates freedom. Freedom from impulsive regret. Freedom from emotional chaos. Freedom from self-sabotage triggered by temporary states. Master the moment, because the moment is where identity is shaped. Chapter 13. Attention is your life force. Where it goes, your reality forms. Your attention is not passive. It is not neutral. It is one of the most powerful forces shaping your life. Where your attention goes, energy flows. And where energy flows consistently, structure forms. Habits form. Identity forms. Reality forms. You become what you repeatedly focus on. If your attention is scattered across distraction, comparison, drama, and noise, your energy fragments. A fragmented mind produces fragmented results. If your attention is directed toward growth, discipline, clarity, and truth, your energy consolidates. A focused mind produces momentum. Attention is your life force in motion. Every moment you are feeding something. You are strengthening something. You are charging something with energy. And over time, what you feed becomes dominant. This is not metaphor alone. Neuroscience confirms it. Neural circuits strengthen with repeated activation. The thoughts you rehearse become easier to access. The narratives you repeat become default beliefs. The emotional patterns you revisit become automatic reactions. Attention is repetition at the mental level. If you repeatedly focus on what is lacking, Your brain sharpens sensitivity to lack. If you repeatedly focus on what is possible, your brain sharpens sensitivity to opportunity. The brain filters reality based on what it expects to see. This is why two people can experience the same environment and interpret it differently. Their attention is tuned differently. Attention is like tuning a frequency. When you tune to distraction, you notice more distraction. When you tune to growth, you notice more opportunities to grow. Your daily focus becomes your psychological climate. Distraction may feel harmless. A scroll here, a notification there, a short escape from effort. But small distractions compound. Every interruption trains your mind to fragment. Fragmentation weakens depth. Without depth, meaningful progress becomes difficult. Depth requires sustained attention. Sustained attention builds mastery. The modern environment is designed to capture your attention. Your focus is valuable. Platforms compete for it. Notifications interrupt it. Algorithms exploit it. If you do not protect your attention, something else will consume it, and whatever consumes it will shape you. Attention also influences emotional state. When you focus repeatedly on comparison, insecurity increases. When you focus repeatedly on threat, anxiety strengthens. When you focus repeatedly on growth, confidence builds. The emotional tone of your life is linked to what you rehearse mentally. This is why awareness of input matters. What do you read daily? What do you watch? Who do you listen to? What conversations dominate your time? These inputs shape attention. Attention shapes belief. Belief shapes action. Action shapes identity. If you want a different identity, change your attention first. You cannot build discipline while feeding distraction constantly. You cannot build peace while feeding chaos. You cannot build confidence while feeding self-doubt. Attention is selective. You cannot focus deeply on everything at once. When you choose to focus on one thing, you are choosing not to focus on another. This is power. When you protect morning attention, you shape the tone of your day. When you protect evening attention, you shape the quality of your rest. Small windows of focused awareness have disproportionate impact. Attention also determines perception of time. When distracted, time feels fragmented and fast. When focused, time feels intentional and meaningful. This changes your experience of life itself. The more present your attention, the richer your experience becomes. Presence increases awareness. Awareness increases intentionality. Intentionality increases alignment. Alignment reduces internal conflict. When attention aligns with values, you feel grounded. But when attention constantly contradicts values, tension grows. For example, if you value health, but constantly focus on convenience and indulgence, your attention feeds the opposite of your stated priority. That internal contradiction drains energy. Align attention with intention. Choose deliberately what you rehearse mentally. Another dimension of attention is gratitude. When you intentionally focus on progress, even small progress, you reinforce motivation. You remind your nervous system that effort produces movement. This builds hope grounded in evidence. Hope is not fantasy. It is recognition of incremental change. Attention can either magnify obstacles or magnify possibility. Both exist. Which one you strengthen determines your direction. Attention is not about blind positivity. It is about disciplined focus. It is about deciding what deserves your mental energy. The mind will wander. That is natural. Mastery lies in returning it. Each time you redirect your focus toward what matters, you strengthen control. Each return is a repetition. Each repetition builds stability. Over time, your attention becomes less reactive and more intentional. You stop being pulled by every stimulus. You choose where to look, and where you look shapes who you become. Treat your attention as sacred, because it is the channel through which your life is built. Direct it wisely. Chapter 14. Remove energy leaks. Eliminate distractions, drama, and digital noise. You do not lose your life in one dramatic collapse. You lose it in small leaks, tiny distractions, unnecessary conversations, digital noise, emotional drama, repeated interruptions that feel insignificant in the moment, but compound over time. A leaking system never reaches full power. Most people believe they need more time, more motivation, more clarity. Often, what they truly need is less leakage. Every notification pulls attention away. Every unnecessary argument drains emotional energy. Every hour spent scrolling fragments focus. The cost is subtle, but real. Attention switching requires cognitive effort. Each time you shift from one task to another, your brain must reorient. That reorientation consumes energy. Multiply that by dozens of small interruptions, and mental fatigue becomes inevitable. This is not weakness. It is biology. Your brain is optimized for depth, not constant fragmentation. Digital environments are engineered to capture your attention. Bright colors, endless feeds, algorithmic reinforcement. These systems exploit novelty bias, the brain's attraction to new stimuli. Novelty triggers dopamine. Dopamine feels good, but dopamine without depth creates dependency. When you repeatedly chase small bursts of stimulation, your tolerance for sustained focus decreases. Deep work begins to feel uncomfortable. Stillness feels restless. This is an energy leak. Distraction trains you to avoid discomfort. Growth often requires boredom, repetition, concentration. If your system is accustomed to constant stimulation, meaningful effort feels heavy. To build strength, you must reduce unnecessary input. This does not require isolation from the world. It requires intentional filtering. Audit your inputs. Which conversations leave you energized? Which ones leave you drained? Which digital habits contribute to clarity? Which ones create noise? Energy leaks often hide in drama. Drama feels intense. It captures attention. It stimulates emotion, but it rarely produces constructive outcome. Engaging repeatedly in drama trains your mind to seek intensity over substance. Substance builds progress. Intensity consumes energy. Protecting your energy means stepping away from cycles that do not produce growth. You do not need to respond to every opinion. You do not need to defend yourself in every disagreement. You do not need to participate in every conversation. Silence can be power when chosen intentionally. Another major leak is comparison. Comparison redirects attention away from your own process and towards someone else's pace. It distorts perception. It magnifies insecurity. It fragments focus. When you compare constantly, your attention feeds inadequacy. Return attention to your lane. Measure progress against your previous self, not against curated images of others. Environment influences focus. If your physical space is cluttered, your mind absorbs that signal. Clutter increases cognitive load. Order reduces friction. Simplify what surrounds you. Create visual cues that support intention. Books instead of endless notifications. Workspace instead of constant distraction. Protect your mornings. The first moments of the day shape mental tone. If your attention begins with noise, it sets a scattered baseline. If it begins with clarity, it establishes control. Protect your evenings. The final moments shape recovery. If your mind ends in stimulation, rest becomes shallow. Recovery decreases. Tomorrow's energy weakens. Energy leaks are often habits disguised as relaxation. Scrolling may feel restful, but if it leaves you drained or agitated, it is not restoration. Rest restores capacity. Distraction depletes it. Learn the difference. One of the most powerful shifts is intentional boredom. Allow yourself moments without stimulation. Let the mind settle. Let attention deepen. This retrains tolerance for stillness. Stillness builds focus. Focus builds output. Output builds momentum. Energy leaks also appear in unresolved decisions. When you postpone a simple choice repeatedly, it occupies mental space. Unfinished loops consume attention. Close small loops quickly. Decide, act, move on. Leakage decreases when clarity increases. The more intentional your schedule, the fewer empty spaces exist for distraction to fill. But do not confuse structure with rigidity. The goal is not control for its own sake. The goal is preservation of energy for meaningful effort. You are not obligated to consume everything available. You are not obligated to respond immediately. You are not obligated to remain accessible at all times. Accessibility without boundary is exhaustion. When you remove leaks, something powerful happens. Your focus sharpens. Your emotional stability increases. Your output improves without additional effort. You realize you did not need more motivation. You needed fewer drains. Every day, ask yourself, where is my energy leaking? Then close one gap. Over time, containment builds power. Power builds progress. Progress builds identity. Guard your energy like a limited resource, because it is. Conclusion. This year does not need perfection. It needs presence. You have seen the pattern now. Change is not dramatic. It is daily. It is choosing yourself instead of waiting. It is facing truth instead of avoiding it. It is keeping small promises. Deciding once. Protecting your energy. Acting when motivation disappears. Directing your attention with intention. Your life is shaped by repetition. Where your focus goes, your energy follows. Where your energy flows consistently, identity forms, and identity determines outcomes. You do not need a perfect plan. You need the next honest step. You do not need constant motivation. You need quiet discipline. You do not need approval. You need alignment. 2026 becomes your year the moment you stop negotiating with your potential and start practicing who you want to be. One promise kept. One boundary set. One action taken. Repeated daily. Years do not change you. Choices do. Choose deliberately. Act consistently. Refuse to quit. And watch what unfolds.